Shout Student Volunteering Week. Maybe a bit of an aggressive title, but really important to do this stuff. That's James, that's who your presenters are today. For those of you that haven't been to one of these webinars before, it'll be important to tell you Student Volunteering Week is 23rd of Feb to the 1st of March, so it's coming up quickly now. You can have a look at the hashtag, which gives you lots of nice fun chat about Student Volunteering Week, so the stuff that's already been going on. The email address for Student Volunteering Week is on the screen, and the website's there too for you to have a look at. And we've content on there, so make sure you do have a look, but I'll talk to you a bit more about that later. What are we hoping that you'll get out of today? So we're going to talk to you about communicating your message and the value of that. We'll talk to you a bit about how you can identify audiences and how you can engage with local media. We'll help you to know about what is a good story and how you make something newsworthy. You'll understand 10 key areas about improving your communications, and you'll also have a chance towards the end in one of the activities to input your ideas for what we should do nationally with the Student Volunteering Week social media campaign. In terms of press, which is what we're going to talk about first, why is press important for Student Volunteering Week? So briefly, it's all about spreading the word. It would be very difficult for us to do our jobs as National Student Volunteering Week organising team if we didn't have press, because one of the things that we're trying to do is to spread a message and get people to know about volunteering and all of the excellent things that students do, and the press is a really good medium for us to do that. It's really important. It's really useful as well for targeting specific people and organisations, or spreading a campaigning message. It's important for making a community, which is particularly good with volunteering. And perhaps a bit cynically, if we get good press, it makes the sponsor happy and it makes any partners that we work with happy. That's at the bottom, because I don't necessarily think that's the most important thing, but it's certainly something to consider. That's the work that you do in your student unions and in your volunteering teams too. To some of the theoretical stuff about press, and this I've consulted with NUS's press officers on this and asked their opinion about what's important for you to know if you want to do some more press work. The first thing I'm going to talk to you about is what makes something newsworthy. And on the screen there's kind of a bullet pointed list of lots of different things. You don't necessarily need to do all of these things, but these are just triggers and ideas for you to start thinking about. So the first one, facts and stats. It's much easier for a journalist to make a good story if you give them some nice numbers or some statistics. Perhaps you say that you had X number of volunteers involved, or you raised X amount of money. That sort of stuff makes it easier for them to make a interesting story about what you're saying. Understanding is important, and I think I'm going to talk about this later too, but I'll mention it here that jargon and lingo doesn't go down very well, because as we know in education there's lots of acronyms and strange jargon, and you have to think about the person that's going to be reading your story and whether or not they'd understand that. But also it's about making what you've done really easy to understand, so really highlighting the activity and what it is and why you've done it. Opinions and controversy make for a good story. So if something is really tragic or terrible, or something a volunteering team department's going to get shut down, that kind of stuff makes for a really interesting story. And opinions wise, perhaps you've got sabbatical officers in your student union that you could get them to give an opinion, or you could talk to your local government officials and get their opinion about your volunteering project or something that you're doing. So particularly here, if we're thinking about local press, things about local community, local schools, community groups, the students that are volunteering with you, perhaps the people that are benefiting from the volunteering project, that makes for a really good story. Audience, this is something that you need to think about in terms of who you're pitching to, who you're trying to get to write about your project. Think who their readers are, or who the people are that are going to to interact with the story and make it relevant to them. That we talk a little bit more about this in the next section around writing a press release. But think about when's the best time to tell the local press or national press about your project. There are no kind of hard and fast rules on this, but thinking out those deadlines, or perhaps getting in contact with them really early and finding out when would be a really good time for them to hear about your stories. Because often after the event isn't as useful to them as before the event, because if you want to get them to come down and take photos, you definitely need to tell them before. A difference, so they're not going to write about the same story 30, 40 times. They need something new and interesting, with a different angle or a different take on something. The final thing is stunts. So I think volunteering teams are really, really good at this. So putting on something that's fun and big and exciting and interesting, great for a picture. Those are really great for getting journalists to be interested. I've written FYI local press. So I think the place can really get some traction with your press for volunteering week is with your local press. So that doesn't mean you can't get traction in the national news, but locally they're going to be really interested in what you're doing, particularly if you're going out into the community and doing some volunteering. So kind of flag that with you, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in next section around press releases. That's a bit of an indication about how to make something newsworthy. Feel free to ask any questions if you don't understand. Creating a press release. This is guidance that our press team have written for you, so that you can. This is the kind of they use when they're thinking about press releases, and this is apparently the standard way of writing a press release. So in terms of headlines, don't write your headline as if you're a journalist and you're writing it for the newspaper, because their job. Your headline for your press release should be a couple of lines that just leaves the journalist in absolutely no doubt as to why the story is news. So it doesn't have to be particularly grammatically accurate. It just needs to really clearly describe in a couple of lines what it is you've done or are doing, so you can see really quickly whether it's interesting to them. It's really interesting, and this is something that I learned when I've been researching for this webinar. So embargo will tell the journalist when they are or are not allowed to publicise the story. So this may not be relevant for your project, but a lot of the time with NUS, we have an opinion on something, or we release a launch of something, and we embargo that news to the press. For example, midnight on the 24th of December. So that's just important for you to know if there is something that's time sensitive, or that you want it to be released at a certain time. It's made an interesting point. Have my local press to literally copy and paste from an email, publishing things not formatted properly without any editing. Because of this. Oh, that's really helpful. Thank you. That's really good. Perhaps our advice about not being grammatically perfect isn't a good idea then, if that's what they do. So that's an interesting thing to think about. Next part, lead paragraph. So the first part of your release should have all of the relevant information. This should cover who, what, when, why and how. So it's all those really obvious questions, and keep it really simple. Don't worry about having to write loads and loads. Just answer those questions. So who involved, what are you doing, when are you doing it, when are you doing it, why are you doing it, and how are you doing it. Answer those, then you'll be giving them the right information. And about 4 or 5 lines, and the journalist should have enough information that they can then start investigating the story if they are interested. So the of your press release is everything else. So a couple of extra paragraphs, giving context, giving extra relevant information, bringing up kind of your opinion on the story, If about a particular event, they could give a bit more detail about the where and the why. So go into more detail about those areas. So quotes. It's really nice to include a quote in your press release. So perhaps you get a quote from one of your volunteers. Perhaps if you want a student union, you get a quote from a sabbatical officer. You could get a quote from one of the people who are benefiting from the volunteering activity about how it's affecting them or impacting their life. Makes a press release a little bit more interesting, and it gives a journalist something to include in their story. Make sure you include the name and the job title of the person giving the quote, and it should be at the top in bold, just so it's really obvious who it is. And remember that the journalist won't have much space for a quote, and they probably won't use every word, so try and make the first line really short and punchy that sums up what you're trying to say. Quote should be no more than 2 or 3 lines, and make sure that your first line is the really important and impactful part. After the end, and this is something that I was like, well, I don't understand, so our press team have clarified for me because it's confusing. So just making sure that after the end of your press release, you've got all the important stuff like contact details, including, if irrelevant, your kind of outside of office contact details. So if your volunteering activity is taking place at the weekend and you only work in the week, but you want journalists to come onto the activity, and make sure you include a mobile number or somewhere they can contact the most appropriate person for the project. This is also a place that you can add any extra stuff that isn't necessarily important to the main body of the work. So links to any relevant reports or research, kind of extra that isn't essential to the press release, but you think a journalist would find useful. Often also looking for case studies. So if you haven't got case studies in the body of your press release, then this is a place to include them. Okay? Do you have any questions at this stage about press releases? Or opinions, stuff that you don't necessarily agree with? Okay, I will carry on. Next little bit is just around develop key messages, and I'm not going to go into too much detail about this because Toral's going to talk about this more in the communication section. So I've talked about this before. Never use jargon. They won't understand it and it's off-putting. The top bullet point on the side, identify the single most important idea. I think this is really important, and I think it's something that we struggle with in our area of work in terms of like volunteering and student opportunity stuff, because there's so much good stuff to talk about that it's hard to narrow it down to one point of interest. But have to think about it might not necessarily be the thing that you find the most interesting, but think about what is the main issue, what is the main problem that you're trying to solve, what is the main cause that's involved, and that's probably your most important idea. Moving on, keep it simple and concise. That's kind of obvious, but worth saying. Make it memorable. So if a journalist is reading through 10, 15 press releases that day, what is it that's going to make yours stand out? The real world. That's the benefits. There's no worse than just really kind of pessimistic news, and you're in a really valuable position because volunteering largely, although you might be tackling a really awful issue or an injustice, volunteering is generally quite positive, and so you can stress the benefits. So I urge you to do that. Okay, we won from press. That's kind of a whistle-stop talk, and that's the key stuff that our press team at NUS identified, and most important things for you to know in your positions, particularly when you're doing lots of other stuff as well. You may be lucky enough to already have somebody that you work with that looks at press already, but interesting to know about how to do this. And then for those of you that don't have anybody do this and you're expected to, that will give you enough of an overview and guidance for you to be able to go and write your own press releases and make stories that are newsworthy.
Could I add as well, if you're ever in the position of writing the articles yourself, like a really key thing to do is just to make sure that you've got a couple of headings, a couple of bold headings within the piece, kind of summarize everything in the piece. So you should be able to scan the page, just get the title of the piece and like 2 headlines, and from that you should be able to see kind of the whole narrative.
That's all. Thank you. That hopefully will be helpful. We will include all of the stuff that I've just talked about in the briefing, so don't panic if you didn't write down everything I just said, because I realise that we gave you quite a lot of information. Okay, going into more general communications. Sorry, just one second. Alex from Plymouth, have you got any examples of successful press releases? Yes, we will be able to send you some releases. I will include those in the briefing. That's a really good idea. Does anyone else have any questions or requests regarding that section? So we'll go on to kind of general communications, and I think you've got kind of 10 tips for us.
I have, yeah. So to reintroduce myself, I'm a communications producer at NUS. So I work on comms stuff for campaigns. So this year we've been using a lot of social media in our kind of main general election campaign, which has been really interesting. So I'm just going to talk through 10 tips based on the kind of work we've been doing this year. So the first one, and probably I think the most kind of key point with your social media, is to understand your audience. What are you speaking to? You've probably got a few different social media tools that you use to speak to your audience. So you might have a Facebook account, you might have a Twitter account, or a few Twitter accounts, or an Instagram. What followers are you going to have for each different social media medium, and can you change your messages slightly depending on that medium? So NUS, for example, we have 3 different Twitter accounts. We've got NUS Extra, which is our kind of commercial one, NUS Connect, which is our union-facing one, and NUS UK, which is the student-facing one. And when on a big campaign, we try and utilise all 3 of these Twitter accounts, but the messages that we'll put out on each one will be quite different. So this year we've been working on our general election campaign, and the hashtag is Generation Vote. And we'll always use that same hashtag and the same campaign tone across all of these Twitter accounts, but we'll try and pull out different content and different parts of the campaign depending on who's going to be interested in what. So NUS UK student-facing one, we might try and pull out like interesting statistics around our policy ask, something that's shocking that might bring in kind of less politicised people and get them interested in it. Whereas the NUS Connect one, we might be talking about what unions are doing for the campaign and show examples of what unions are doing. And the same message, they're all kind of leading to the same point, but the way you deliver that message, it just needs to be carefully tailored to the kind of people that you've got for each social media account. So again, with Facebook, you may have less dedicated followers on Facebook. So on Twitter, these people have actively decided to follow you, whereas on Facebook, they may have just liked a post that you sent out ages ago, or they may have a friend that liked a post or something like that. And so they may be less dedicated followers. So you want to think about not bombarding your Facebook followers with too many messages, and think about kind of funny and interesting content that might draw them in to your campaign. So, yeah, who you're engaging with, why would they engage with you, what interests them, what interests your audiences. You want to cater to students who are engaged in volunteering, obviously, and keep them involved in the conversation, but you want to be putting things on social media which are going to get shared far and wide and engage new people in the idea. You've got a Student Volunteering Week hashtag. What kind of messages can you put out where you can add perhaps different hashtags to that message, as well as the Student Volunteering Week hashtag, so it's going to get shared and people are going to see it who are looking at different hashtags, and they might then look at your Student Volunteering Week hashtag and click on it and therefore see what it's all about. So it's about kind of spreading that message further. So tweets that have pictures tend to get higher level of engagement. Can you tweet something out with a picture? Facts and statistics I mentioned before, I think with the numbers, particularly a shocking statistic, tend to get shared a lot more. BuzzFeed style content, obviously very popular. For those of you that didn't know, you can actually set up a BuzzFeed account for free and create BuzzFeeds for free. It's surprisingly easy to do. I've no doubt that there's some fun content around student volunteering that you might be able to pull together. That's something, again, that's likely to get shared far and wide. So NUS have been doing BuzzFeeds for the last few months. We're quite new at it, but we found that it's a really helpful way of delivering slightly more complicated political messages in a funny and easier to digest way. And some of the ones that we've done have been shared loads, and I think amongst audiences that we wouldn't typically be communicating with. So that sort of thing is a really great way of getting to new audiences. Building an online community, it's about creating a space really where people or groups can share experiences. So volunteers, you're looking at building online communities where volunteers will speak to each other and where you're sort of encouraging and facilitating those kinds of discussions. A couple of examples of things that we've done at NUS to try and build our online community. We've set up Facebook polls, which is free and easy to do. You just need to download the add-on. So you can ask a question, you can get people to vote on your poll, and you can then give them the answer. So it looks like you're just asking a question and gathering data, but actually you're facilitating discussion amongst these groups, because they can comment on the poll question and give their opinions and start speaking to each other. And when you back the poll results, you're also letting people know how other students in that community feel about a certain topic. Can be really useful. Something else we're looking at doing is an article called To Use, You Choose, which we want to make a regular piece on NUS Connect, where we ask different unions to offer opposing views on some kind of provocative topic, and then we ask readers to vote. And we'll share those results. So again, it's just about encouraging people to get involved in a discussion where they have some kind of shared interest in it. So I think it's good to think about how you can do that with volunteering. Can you use polls? Can you use questions and people to communicate with each other on your Facebook account? Interacting with online influencers. Online influencers are just people or organisations that have a lot of clout, so potentially they have lots of followers or they engage well with big organisations. So you want to work out who, within the realms of your campaign, who are your big online influencers, and can you work with them? Are there local charities or volunteer organisations that you can work with them on something and then promote it together, or can they retweet you? You work out who these people or these organisations are and then target them and do something that promotes them so that they'll promote you back. And just be a really useful way of getting your message heard again and getting your message out to new audiences. Digital platforms. Obviously, there are lots of different ways you can engage with your audiences. Digital is only one of them. As far as social media is concerned, it's really great to get your different social media accounts all speaking to each other. So, for example, you can link to your own website in your Facebook post. You can link to your Facebook account in a tweet. I want all of these things to be speaking to each other. I know we spoke before about how the messages are going to be different across the different mediums, but that doesn't mean that you can't still be pushing people to your Facebook account to see the kinds of things that you do there, or to your BuzzFeed. You can use programs like Hootsuite. I don't know if anyone will have heard of that. Hootsuite is a really useful social media platform that basically pulls together all your different social media accounts so you can manage them from one website. It's slightly more technical, but maybe if you do have a social media specialist that you work with, they might be able to work on Hootsuite, which can be really useful for integrating all your social media accounts and getting them to work together. Is everything. It's a really obvious point, but it's not easy to do. So you want to think about your overall brand and the overall brand of your campaign. Be conversational. What tone of voice of your campaign? Maybe your social media aligns with your union's strategy. Don't be too cliquey with it. Although obviously you're working within a volunteering community, you want to make sure that you're always trying to expand your audience, and original content can be really key to that. Voice is very important. So think about your brand and your tone of voice and your campaign's tone of voice. Campaign brand should work within your overall tone of voice and be consistent and coherent. As we talked about before, think about changing the tone of your campaign messages depending on your audience. So one message might work for unions, whilst another is going to work for the wider student market. Of your post. Again, this one sounds really obvious, but always read through anything before you tweet it out to make sure that it makes sense, and look at your Facebook post and look at the length of it. Keep interactive. Blogging is boring, so you want to be always asking your Twitter followers questions, always getting engaged. Pull in and link to other content from other organisations about similar things. Retweet people's thoughts when they tweet at you. Look at other Twitter accounts for some inspiration on this. So Oreo and Red Bull, neither of them are campaigning organisations, but they are both famously very good at widening their audience. So their Twitter followers will often be people who don't have very much interest in those particular products, but they just really enjoy the content that comes out of those Twitter accounts. A very famous example is Cancer Research No Makeup Selfie campaign. Love it, all of it. It is good to have a think about why certain things take off and how you can get these things shared. Practice what-if scenarios and talk through do's and don'ts. If you do have someone managing your social media for a campaign, make sure they thoroughly understand the campaign and they know how to respond. If they get questions, easy or difficult questions on Twitter, they're prepared and able to respond really quickly. People are quite used to asking questions on Twitter which don't get answered, they don't get answered for a long time, or they don't get answered right away. So people tend to be very grateful when you can get back to them and engage in a conversation straight away. People love being retweeted, people love being favorited. All of these things can really help with campaigns. So yeah, this follows on with the next point really, which is respond. Take time to talk back to your audience. It can be time consuming, but it's a great way of communicating and of building up your online community. You engage with those who are engaging with you, and make sure you continue to take that audience forward. Anyway, this is really, really, really important. You can use Twitter Analytics. It's free for every account at analytics.twitter.com. If you click onto that, it will just show you all the tweets you've sent out on that account recently, and it will show you how much interaction you've had with each post. Again, if you have Hootsuite, that's really good for analytics. And you look at engagement you've had on your hashtags. Think about peak times for posting. When are people on Twitter? When are people on Facebook? Put your hashtag, how many retweets have you had? On the Facebook page, you can look at insights. So you can look at the reach and popular posts. It's really important to think about these things when you're looking at doing a campaign and taking it further. What's been really popular? I mean, there's nothing that's more useful than that, because that's evidence of what worked for you and for your campaign and what hasn't. So it really just includes stay on brand. Always think about your audience. Think about the content that people want. A lot of it is common sense, really. Just think about yourself and what you think of as good content and what you might click on yourself, what you might follow through. People like photos, people like offers, people like good quotes, statistics and facts, all kind of help to messages. So that's kind of it.
Amazing.
We're going to do a task.
Yeah, I learnt loads then.
Oh, good. People like kittens, yeah.
Yeah, people do like kittens.
Put
That's
kittens
what
on
someone said in
everything.
the chat. So does anybody have any questions for Toril at this stage before we get you to do a little activity? And those 10 tips that she just talked through. There's been some about Hootsuite and TweetDeck and how you use it, and very helpful linking people to BuzzFeed, because a couple of them had never heard of BuzzFeed.
Oh,
cool.
okay, wow.
Yeah, check it out. Although don't check it out when you've got a lot to do, because it's really distracting.
Yeah,
it's one of those things where you click on one thing and then they link you to something that's similar, and yeah, you waste hours on BuzzFeed, but it's great fun. Great with the Christmas holidays coming up. Is there any questions before we get you to do activity? I mean, activity too, but it's really nice for you to pick up our brains. I say it's a royal ask, because it will be you answering them. Can we set up a social media session? What do you mean?
Specifically for social media.
Can we set up a social media session with someone who can answer questions as we go along? Do you mean that you would be, what exactly would you want from that? Because we might be able to answer stuff a bit now. Someone who's everything. Someone that, Chrissy said that doing media training and they advised against physically linking Twitter and Facebook. Content is different, but it can look lazy. Yeah. What do you think about that?
Well, I think, yeah, overkill. You don't want to do it too much, but I don't know. People are going to have different opinions with these things. You know, everyone and no one is an expert on social media, really, because it's still quite a new thing. I think as long as you're not doing it too much, you know, if you've posted, like for example with our poll that I was talking about earlier, the poll sits on Facebook only because it's a Facebook poll, but we link to that from Twitter. We would ask the question on Twitter and say, answer this in our Facebook poll and link through to a Facebook page. And our hope is there not only that they'll answer that, but also that somebody who hasn't seen our Facebook page before might go on and might be interested in some of the different content that you've got there. So you are talking to a very different audience, but there could be some occasions when you might want to connect the two.
Yeah. It's really bad if every single tweet is a link to Facebook.
Yeah. No. It needs to be right. Yeah, sorry, I should have clarified that. Yeah, you need to do this fairly rarely because you don't want to look like you're obsessively self-publicizing. You want to talk about all sorts of things around your campaign and pull in stuff from other newspapers, things that you do agree with, things that you don't agree with, and occasionally pull in content yourself.
Yeah. The suggestion has been from Scarlett, a session running through different networks, different social networks, making sure everyone has a little look at each one and some key. Yeah, I'll feed that back to the comms team because Tom's in our comms team and we may be able to run, in 2015, we may be able to run a social media training session.
Absolutely, yeah.
If that's something that interests you. We'll include a few bits and bobs in the briefing. We'll expand on some of the stuff that we've talked about so far. That's a really good idea and it's useful to have the feedback. Scheduling. What do you think about scheduling? Is it something you rely on?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I'm lucky we have Hootsuite for the organisation, so we schedule absolutely everything through Hootsuite. It's good to be responding live, of course, when you can, but scheduling is so important for using social media outside of work hours.
Yeah.
So obviously thinking about when the kind of hot times on social media are evenings, people are on Twitter in the evenings more so than in the mornings. So think about those kinds of messages and sending those out at the evenings, weekends. So yeah, scheduling is really important.
Yeah, so perhaps something for you to do is do an evaluation and look at when your followers are using Twitter and Facebook, and then using something like Hootsuite or TweetDeck, set some tweets and then see how they do. But that's what they're really good for, and it's really helpful.
Yeah.
We're going to go on an activity with you now, just to give you some time to think about your social media or your own communications. So what we'd like you to do, just for a few moments, we're going to give you about a minute to do the first bullet point, which is we will list all of the digital media channels that you know of that are available to you. Or then just kind of guess, but I'd assume that most of you have kind of Twitter, Facebook. So have a think about other stuff too. And just scribble down on a piece of paper in front of you the different digital media channels that you have. I'll give you 40 seconds. What do we media? So, Twitter, your online media, your website, Instagram.
Everything you use basically to speak to people that isn't printed or isn't physical, everything online.
So all sorts of things you might have.
Websites and social media.
Yeah, more than one website that you can use as a channel. You might, if you're a union or a hub or a separate volunteering team, you might have your website, but then you also might be able to use your institution's web or blog. Give me 20 more seconds. There's lots of different ones. Think any that you have available to you. It doesn't have to just be the ones that you run. So you should have started off doing that now. What I'd like you to do on the second bullet point on there is to start thinking about the different types of audience that you have on each channel. So you don't have time to do all of them, so start by picking all of them. I'll give you a minute to do this, to just kind of write around it perhaps or underneath it. Who are the people that you're speaking to on those channels? You've got seconds. You're thinking of everything. This is just to get the thought process going, because I find it easier to think about things while in the session rather than afterwards. So I'll give you a few more seconds. Just think of who is the audience, who are you talking to on those different channels. And don't write students, if possible. And differentiate between active volunteers, inactive volunteers, people that don't volunteer, or perhaps think about different types of students in terms of different communities. Okay, now the last bullet says create a post for each channel to promote your campaign. I think that's probably a bit of a big ask, but what we're going to ask you to do is just to do one post. So you can choose whether it's a kind of a few bullet points of what you would put in a blog post, or is it a tweet, is it a Facebook post? You don't write it word for word, but just think about the type of thing you would post about, whether you choose a picture and what that picture would be of trying to talk to on that channel. So I'm going to give you a minute and a half to do this. So choose one of the channels and thinking about that audience, what would you say to them? The test is to get you thinking about it. .30 seconds. Just try and summarise what you would put in your post, stuff that we talked about before. So would you include a picture? Would you include a poll? Who are you talking to? Is there a particular ask, or what are you trying to say? Okay, if anyone wants to share theirs, then please feel free to pop down what you've put in the chat bar, and that'll be really interesting, but you don't have to. It's not compulsory. But if anybody has got anything that they'd like to share, it would be helpful for those of you that would like that. I've noticed in the chat bar that a few of you are sharing Twitter handles. That's totally fine, and I encourage it. So if you want to do that, if you're already on Twitter, whether that's your work Twitter account or whether it's your personal one, feel free to share it, and you can all follow each other and have a chat. And tweet on the hashtag SVW2015, then you'll find each other as well. Hopefully that activity was helpful to get you to start thinking about how you differentiate the types of posts that you do, and all the different channels that are available to you. Because sometimes you think, oh, I've only got Twitter or I've only got Facebook, but actually if you think in terms of all of that are available to you, not just the ones that you control, there's actually quite a lot there. I'm going to move on. We're nearly done, so we're just going to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing for Student Volunteering Week, and then I've got another little activity for you to be input into the Student Volunteering Week communications plan. When we're doing this webinar is because press and communications are essential for the success of Student Volunteering Week. Because it's run as a national campaign, it would be very difficult for myself and Rachel, who's the SW manager from Student Hubs. It would be difficult for us to get around all over the UK and organise Student Volunteering Week activities for you. So anything that we organise apart from these webinars, and we organise other things like the celebration event and the grants and things, one of the things we do is think about communications. So talk to you a little bit about those in a second in detail about how you can get involved with them. But it's really important to us that this is successful. But the second bullet point, your help is essential. It would be very boring if it's just me, Rachel, and people from NUS tweeting or Facebooking or writing blog posts. So one of the reasons we've done this webinar is so that you can get more involved. And you can be part of the conversation. So just to give you a bit of context about what we're going to do next, last year in the countdown to Student Volunteering Week 2014, I say last year, it's still 2014, but the last Student Volunteering Week, we did a good deed every day in the month before Student Volunteering Week. What we'd like to do this year is another countdown. So we'll be starting on the 23rd of January, running to the 23rd of Feb, which is the first day of Student Volunteering Week. What I'd like you to do in this next activity is just have a chat. So have a think about yourself, think on your own, and then have a chat in the chat bar about what you think we should do for that social media countdown. 3 bullet points on there to help you. So what could we think around? Should there be a theme even? What hashtag could we use, or what hashtags could we use? Should it be a picture down? Should it be that every day we do a different action? Should we keep it the same as last year and do it that there's a deed every day from January to February? So we've got about 2 minutes just to have a little think. If you've got any ideas about what you think we should do, then put them in the chat bar, and then we'll take them back to our next comms meeting. We're going to be deciding this, and we'll use your ideas, and hopefully you'll come up with some good ones for us. So have a think yourself, and then write anything in the chat bar that you think we could do. Oh, so someone suggested random acts of kindness, video student volunteer profiles. Scarlett's using poverty as a theme, so they theme it around that. We could do a different cause for every day. A advent calendar, short news. New Year's, that's a good idea. Oh, some really good ideas, thank you. Keep them in to amalgamate a couple of your ideas into one more idea. We're coming to the end now, and I don't want to keep you much longer, so keep thinking of those ideas. If you think of something afterwards that's a good idea, either email it to us or tweet at us, or you can suggest it now in the chat bar. Just to give you a bit more information, I'm going to announce who has got the grants for this year in a second. But just the things on the slide, we'll be announcing the Student Volunteer of the Year award shortlist the week beginning the 19th of January. Look out for that. We'll announce that on the Student Activities JISC mail and on the Student Volunteering Network mail, and also we'll be emailing to you and the nominees personally. You can contribute to it, which is either for you or you can encourage your students to do it, is we just launched the Student Volunteering Week blog, and really easy for you to blog post in. There's a few kind of tips and guidelines about what to include and how long it should be, and then you just email it to the Student Volunteering Week account and we will just check it and then we'll pop it up there. So we really want you to contribute to the blog, because it's very boring if it's just us talking. Time is much more interesting for everybody if it's you telling us really good stories or writing about your volunteers. So if you contribute to the Student Volunteering Week blog, then the information's on the screen. The link's gone a bit funny because of the formatting, but it's basically studentvolunteeringweek.org.uk/blog. On the SVW website, we've just put loads of resources up, so logos and things that you can use in your comms and promotions, so feel free to use those. I have a very lucky job announcing who has won the grants next year. I'm just going to whiz through them quickly, and I won't go into detail about why now, because we will be blogging about that and talking about that on social media. So if you, and we'll be emailing all people who put grant applications in, whether they were successful or not, because they were all amazing and it was really difficult to choose. So we'll be emailing people, particularly those that weren't successful, to encourage you to still do your idea, because by us not you grant funding, it doesn't mean we think your idea is a bad idea. We actually thought that all of them were excellent ideas, but just some of them were more fundable than others, and some of them needed the funding a little bit more. So the institutions and teams that have got grant funding are Plymouth, Kingston, Teesside, Salford, Essex, Solent, Franklin College, City of Bath College, and Exeter. So I think a few of you are here, and a few of you have got the funding. So well done. And for those of you that are here that haven't, I'm really sorry. It was very, very difficult to choose. Rachel and I were agonising for a very long time. So the grant funding, we'll be emailing you about it with more detail about what you need to do next. And I'm emailing those of you that weren't successful to tell you about why and what we suggest. And as I said, encouraging you to carry on with your idea. So well done to those of you. We were really impressed with the number of and the quality of the missions. Tweet about it yet? Yeah, that's okay. You can tweet about it. We've got a minute for questions. If you have any further questions, we'll be sending out this recorded webinar, some slides and a briefing with the information that Toril and I have talked to you about. You can contact the Student Volunteering Week team on studentvolunteeringweek.org.uk. You can tweet, there's the website, and you can follow us on Facebook as well. If you want info at Student Volunteering Week and it's a specific comms question that I can't answer, then I will ask Toril and she'll be able to help you. In January, the first one on Thursday the 15th is about student and the general election. So that will be talking about how you can get volunteering teams, your clubs, your societies, your student media involved with the election and National Voter Registration Day. Then in February is about enterprise. So we'll be talking about making SU more enterprising, and how to start doing more enterprising stuff. On the 19th of March, we'll be doing student media, supported or censored, which sounds quite controversial. It's going to be interesting. We're talking about the relationship between student media and your student union, how that works well, and what you can do to try and make it work better, because I know that's in some organisations. They're all free, and it takes 12 till 1. So join us. And then Lee, thank you. And you can click on the link on the slide, or you should be able to, to complete the survey. If it doesn't work, then I'm going to email it around to all of you afterwards anyway, so don't panic about that. But please complete the survey. Let us know how this webinar was for you. Thanks so much for your comms wisdom. If you have any questions, please do email us. Yeah, good luck with your press and your communications for Student Volunteering Week. I'm hoping to see lots of good things coming for all of you. Let us know if you have any questions. Bye.
Bye.